Linden Falls by Joshua Hershey. So, this book was actually sent to me by its author for review. I feel as though I've really made it on BookTube now that an author has sent me their book for review. So, thank you very much to Joshua Hershey. Now, this is a Christian fantasy novel. Now, the subgenre of Christian fantasy contains some pretty notable works, the Narnia books, foremost among them, I suppose, as well as like The Lord of the Rings, while not explicitly Christian, certainly implicitly so. But I read a lot of those Narnia books when I was a kid, and so with this book, I was really anxious to see how I would respond to that subgenre again, diving back into it. And I was really, really pulling hard for this book. I really, really wanted to like it. I was really hoping it would just be a stellar, fantastic book. However, unfortunately, I can't really say that it was. Now, when I review books, I don't mind criticizing books, even if it's pretty harshly, as long as it's authors like Stephen King or Dean Koontz or people that have sold millions of books and are worth millions of dollars. My little pissant criticism will not harm them in the slightest. But with smaller authors such as this, I don't really relish having to criticize their works or pick it apart. However, in the name of honesty and forthrightness, and perhaps for the sake of future improvement, I will. But I want to be as respectful as possible, and I want to start out by saying that this book had a lot of promise at its heart. It really did. There was a lot of potential with the concept of this book, but I don't think that its execution really lived up to that potential. To put it bluntly, this book was pretty rough. It was seriously rough. It needed a lot of work, I think, but I will explain as best I can. So, Linden Falls. What is the story of this book? Well, it takes place in. Don't ask me what the name of the world this book takes place in is called because I don't think we're ever told, but it takes place in some unspecified fantasy world, which is caught up in a battle between the forces of darkness and light. The former being led by Lavian, who is this angel snake dude on the cover, and who is really, Lucifer slash Satan. And then the forces of light are led by Jezul, or Jesus Christ, actually. It's none too subtle with some of its naming in here. But anyway, it follows the main character is one young woman named Mabel. And Mabel one day finds herself in possession of a mystical book which she has the unique ability to read and break the darkness which hangs over her nation, which is Linden, and then hasten the destruction of Lavian, the serpent, the devil, at the hands of Jezul, or Jesus. And so that's kind of just the long and short of it. In fact, I don't know how much more I can summarize the plot because I don't really know entirely how much of the plot I actually understood. It's obviously a very, very overtly Christian plot, but it's still wildly confusing, actually. So that leads me into the criticisms of this book. This book has a pace that I can only describe as breakneck. Like, I have never read a book that moves quite like this. It begins right smack in the middle of an action scene, and then it only proceeds to get more frantic from there. Um, the best way I can describe reading this book is like trying to jump onto a moving train, and I don't mean like a diesel freight train. I mean like one of those magnetic bullet trains that goes like 300 miles an hour. It's like trying to jump on one of those. It's going about it goes from 0 to 100 on the first page. I mean, it's moving when it starts, and so much is just not explained adequately, if at all. It moves so fast, it throws so much at you that I'll say for about the first 100 pages, and this is not a long book, it's only 277 pages, but for the first about 100 of those pages, I really had scarcely any grasp of what was actually happening. It goes so fast, it throws so many concepts and characters that are not properly set up or explained that you really are just kind of flying by the seat of your pants when you're reading this. Now, it does get better in the latter half, I will say, but that doesn't say a lot because again, about the first 100 pages of this book are pretty rough, honestly. It's very hard to get hold of what's actually happening at times. The action is described just so inadequately. It's described in a very passing, very quick manner that makes it, again, very difficult to understand what's actually happening. So I think there's a lot in this book that was probably lost upon me because I just couldn't grab hold of it so much. But the characters in this book also aren't good at all, really. Sadly, there is an attempt with the main character, Mabel, to make her rounded and fleshed out. However, it falls pretty flat because all the information about her is delivered in one of the most egregious examples of telling, not showing, and that information is not just told to us, it's told to us in a very passing manner that's just feels kind of tossed out there, doesn't carry much weight. And the other characters, the secondary characters, are nothing more than names. They really are. None of the characters have any depth in this except Mabel, and that's just very, very, very shallow depth with her. But there are some death scenes towards the end that I think were meant to be like really, really moving, but really, really weren't because the characters, again, were not set up properly. But now let's get down to like the actual writing of the book. This book needed some work. Seriously, it desperately needed not only editing but just some basic proofreading because one, it's got a significant amount of typos and grammatical mistakes in it. But also there are some lines in here that I feel as though it, it they needed to be revised or um, you know gone over again because some of these lines just are, well, you'll see, like there's this line right here. Mabel pried the book loose and was startled by its weight. It feels warm, she said musingly, and caressed the hard ice-like cover. It feels warm as she caressed the ice-like cover. That really jumped out at me. But then we have over here on page, I believe it's 145, we have uh, this line right here. Without warning, Lavian burst through a column of flame, gashes marring his flesh-like body. Flesh-like body. I feel like if you have a body, it's probably just made of flesh, not flesh-like. So I probably would have just said body in that instance. But then on the very next page, we have this line. The others remained silent, eloquent with rage. How exactly are you eloquent with anything if you're silent? I mean, eloquent means well spoken, fluent and persuasive. I don't know how you're eloquent with anything if you're silent. Again, this book needed some serious editing because some of these lines just aren't, they don't they don't hold up when you actually scrutinize them. But then also there are some instances where I think the author there are some instances where I think the author misuses some words, and then there are some instances where I know the author misused some words. Like I think there are a couple instances in here where he uses the word lie, where I think he needed to use the word lay. It's kind of a confused tense issue. But then there are times in this book, and this I really thought was like just a typo, but then it repeated, and I was like, oh no, he's actually just misusing the word. And he confuses the words cavalry and Calvary. Now you might just say that's nitpicking, but that really jumped out at me because I found it highly ironic that in a Christian book you misuse the word Calvary when you meant cavalry. Again, it needed some proofreading, if nothing else. But now let's talk about kind of the resolution to the story, because the story does get better in the second half. I will give it that. After it kind of smooths out somewhat after the frantic, hectic pace of those first 100 or so pages, it does kind of plateau a little bit to where you can at least keep up with it. But then as the story goes on, Lavian, the serpent angel devil dude, who again really is just Satan in this world, decides that he's going to have to kill the angel of the sun in order to stop his own destruction and damnation. And in this world, whatever this world may be in this book, the sun is actually an angel. And I think that's like harkening back to like in Revelation where the author says, and I saw an angel standing in the sun. I think it's kind of an allusion to that. But the sun in the world of this book is actually like an angel. And if they kill the angel of the sun, then it basically destroys all creation and there's no more time. So Lavian, the prophecy of him, finally being destroyed and cast into hell can't happen if, all of creation is destroyed. So that's his main goal towards the end of the book, is to kill the angel of the sun and basically just destroy everything to save his own ass. That's what it's all built up as. That's what the goal is. But then in the end, in spoilers alert, I guess, in the end they actually do that. He actually does manage to kill the angel of the sun and apparently destroys the world. So um, I thought he actually won, and but then no, kind of a literal Deus ex machina. Jezul, or Jesus, descends and just immediately undoes all of that, makes a new creation, and just basically restores the world to like it was. And I was like, no, I don't think, like, I'm not trying to sound like I was rooting for the Satan character. I wasn't. But, like, by the rules which the book itself established, I think he won. Like, at the end, I was like, I think it's pretty clear cut that he actually won. He did what he set out to do. He destroyed the world. I think he actually won. But then when the Jezul character just remakes the world instantly, I was like, no, I think that's cheating. Actually, I think that's actually cheating again by the rules which the book itself had established. I was like, again, I'm not trying to say that I was rooting for the Satan character, but I was like, I think he actually won. And then I think the way that the book resolves was cheating, actually, I think. So the book, it got better towards the end. In fact, I somehow was actually really invested in it there in like the last third. But then at the end, I was like, there's so many moving parts in this, and there are so many objects, magical objects in the book that the characters interact with and have to utilize, that again it's so confusing, and you're never really certain of the nature of any of these things 100%. So it's just remarkably confusing, and you're never sure exactly where you stand, as evinced by the fact that the villain the villain's plan comes to fruition, but then it's just undone like that, and he loses by default, I guess. So the book had issues, as I think I have hopefully explained. But let's talk about the positives. Let's talk about what I liked about the book. So I really, really liked the basic idea of the book. The concept of it was actually really solid. There is a core of it that has real potential to it, but it's everything that was built on top of that foundation isn't very sound. Um, but I did like what it was trying to do, and I think the book's biggest success probably comes from its theological angle. The book is quite successful, I think, at spreading the good news, as they say. It paints a very succinct, if somewhat stripped down, picture of what the basic gist of Christianity is, and it does so in very warm and inviting tones. So I think in that regard, it actually does succeed. But I think in its construction, it needed a lot of work. It really did. I think, and again, I take no pleasure in having to criticize this book so harshly, and I don't want to. It's not something I ever like doing, tearing down somebody else's creation, because I know how much heart has to go into a book. So it's not something I take pleasure in doing. But this book could have been great. It really could have, and there were occasional, very very brief flashes of what the book might have been. But as it stands, it really did need some work. And honestly, it needed to be longer than it was, because again, so much information just isn't explained at all, or adequately, or in a manner that you can really grasp. So it definitely needed some work. But anyway, Linden Falls by Joshua Hershey. Have you read Linden Falls? If you have, let me know down in the comments what you thought about it, whether you have agreed or disagreed with anything I've said about it here today. And if you haven't read Linden Falls, um, I'm unfortunately not going to be able to recommend this book. In fact, to rate this book, my rating of the book, sadly, I'm gonna have to give it like a D plus. I think that's what I could rate it as. It teeters almost on the brink of like C level territory, C minus level territory. It almost breaks over, but as it stands, I think it's sitting about at a D plus. But so I can't, unfortunately, really recommend it. Although I will say that I think that its author has great potential as a writer, and I think that he has the capacity to produce something really great in the future, and I hope he does as well. But yeah, I can't really recommend this book so much, and as it stands right now, it's about at like a D plus level for me. But I wish its author all the best, and thank you once again for sending the book my way. And as always, if you have enjoyed anything you've seen or heard here today, remember to hit that like button and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. And until next time, peace.